Hi, this is Dr. Katie Henry, the host of the Ultimate Health Shift. This is a transformational event where we are going to be busting through barriers, transforming your thoughts, and nourishing your body and your soul. I am so honored to be joined today by Anita Johnston. She First off, has this beautiful glow about her that I'm just honored to be in her presence. But she's a clinical psychologist, a certified eating disorder specialist, and a storyteller. And Anita, I am so honored to have you here and for you to share your stories with all of us today.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
So I love that you are a storyteller, and I know you use a lot of metaphors to help coach and transform people's lives because that's truly what you do. So I would love for you to share with us a little bit of how you came to do the beautiful work that you're doing today.
Well, it started many years ago, um, 30 years ago, probably. And I was supervising a young psychology intern in Hawaii. Um, and she was doing her doctoral dissertation on eating disorders and looking at the incidence of eating disorders. And we met with a third woman who was a social worker who had recovered herself from an eating disorder. And we would meet week after week talking about what we were seeing in the community. And every time we spoke, we said, oh my gosh, there's a lot of people struggling. There ought to be a center for this. And after we said it for about the fifth time, we looked at each other and we laughed and we said, well, let's do it. And so it was one of those, you start it and they will come. Now, mind you, this is the very early 80s. Mm-hmm. And we were getting girls and women from all walks of life, all ages, all ethnicities, all sizes. And we were trying to figure out, okay, what's going on here? And for me, what was most interesting was, first of all, why was it only females? Because back then, that's all that was showing up. Second of all, why was it these particular girls and women? And third, why was the struggle around food and their bodies? And so because I'm a storyteller, I wanted to listen very carefully to their stories. And because as a psychologist, I'm a trained story listener, mm-hmm. I was searching for that common denominator. What was the common thread that ran through all of these experiences that they were having? And what I discovered was this, that the girls and women who struggled with disordered eating and negative body image were like the child in the fairy tale, The Emperor's New Clothes. Now, I'll tell you a brief version of this story. So there was once this emperor, a very vain emperor, who really didn't care much about ruling his kingdom. He was only interested in fine clothing and jewelry. And he had quite a reputation for this. And there were a couple of con artists that heard about him. And so they came into town and they pretended to be tailors. But they told the emperor that their clothing was so fine, only those fit for their station in life could even see it. Well, the emperor was really impressed, and he commissioned a whole new wardrobe for himself. And all the people who worked for the emperor, they carried on about the wonderful clothing because they didn't want to lose their jobs. And even the emperor himself was telling everybody about his magnificent new wardrobe because he didn't want people to think he wasn't fit for his station in life. And so the con artists, they pretended to cut and stitch cloth that really wasn't there. And eventually they went laughing all the way to the bank, leaving the emperor with his new wardrobe, which, of course, there was nothing. So now there was going to be a grand procession, and the emperor is wearing one of his new outfits. And everybody in the crowd is oohing and awing and talking about his magnificent clothing because they didn't want their neighbor to think they were stupid. But there was a child in the audience who said in a very loud voice, "But Mommy, the emperor has no clothes on at all." And when this child spoke, it created a ripple throughout the crowd, and everyone saw the emperor for the fool that he was. So what I discovered is that girls and women who struggled with disordered eating and negative body image were like this child in that they had an uncanny ability to perceive the invisible. They could read between the lines, see the bigger picture, sense hypocrisy. They could tell when things were not okay, even if everyone around them said things were just fine. So they had this capacity to perceive subtle realities. They were very emotionally sensitive and highly intuitive.
Mm.
But because their lives were not fairy tales, whenever they spoke what they were seeing, and I'm talking, as young as like maybe a 4-year-old saying, but mommy, if daddy loves us so much, how come he never comes home? Or some such thing.
Mm-hmm.
We were either ignored, rejected, in some instances ridiculed, and in other instances abused. So what had to happen is they had to find some way to dim their light, to diminish this capacity to perceive these subtle realities, because what they wanted more than anything else in the world, what all of us want more than anything else in the world, is a sense of belonging.
Mm-hmm.
They confused belonging with fitting in. So fitting in is when you try to act like and be like and look like and think like how you think others want you to act and be and think and look.
Mm-hmm.
You abandon yourself. You disconnect from self. Belonging is when you connect with another and stay connected to self. And they knew the difference, just like most of us don't know that difference.
Yeah.
So how does the eating issue come into play? Okay.
Yeah.
Imagine this is a bit of a stretch. Imagine you live in a world where dieting is the norm.
Weird. I've never heard of that before.
For that. But so imagine then that you are this very, what I call thin-skinned, highly intuitive, very emotionally sensitive individual. You feel like, something's not okay. You can't quite put your finger on it, but you know what it is. But if you dare to speak it, people are going to attack you. So you have to diminish this. And now you're on a diet or you're starving. Same thing, right? And you're driving down a road, and you've been down this road 100 times before. But now you're on a diet. What is going to get your attention on either side of that road? Right? Like every restaurant, every fast food place, and especially the ones that are the bad foods. So this is going to really get your attention, because biologically, that's how we're designed when we're starving, is to start to focus on food and find food.
Right.
But you think, oh my gosh, there's something wrong with me. I can't handle me and food, and I'm too fat. Now, as painful as it is to feel like you're too fat, and it's very painful, at least it's a something. So at least you go, oh, I know what's wrong with me now. I know what the problem is. I'm too fat. And at least it has a solution. Lose weight. That's not the real problem. You get caught up in never enough, never losing enough weight, never having the right butt or thighs or whatever. And then the food struggle and the body weight struggle becomes a red herring. So a red herring. Then now we're getting deeper. We're getting pulled deeper and deeper and deeper into this morass, because a red herring is a term from literature that let's say there's a murder mystery, and you're following along, and the question is, well, who killed the old lady? Was it the maid, the butler, or the chauffeur?
Mm-hmm.
And everybody's watching the maid. She's kind of weird, right? She's doing strange things, and so you're all eyes are on the maid. And at the end of the story, there's a twist. It was the butler, who nobody suspected, because everybody was watching the maid.
Mm-hmm.
So this is what happens with the eating and the weight struggles, is they become the red herring, and that becomes the focus. And unfortunately, a lot of people get focused on that, not just the person struggling, but healthcare professionals as well. I think that's the problem. Concerned family members and friends. And so what happens is the real issues that are driving the disordered eating, that's driving the negative body image, they never get resolved. And they can be things like, maybe you have a love-hate relationship with your mother, or maybe your boyfriend ditched you, or you don't know how to make friends, or you're on a career path that's not right for you. Now, these require a complex set of skills to solve. But if you've convinced yourself and everyone around you that the problem is with eating in your body, then that becomes a focus, and it just keeps on going.
Yeah. So that makes so much sense, and that's such a good analogy because keeping and staying caught in that cycle of having the weight be the issue and having that be what they can control is what keeps them stuck in it because they're not able to get to the root cause of it. But what you just shared is such a unique and different way to see it that a lot of people don't see. I mean, I'm a healthcare professional myself, so I hear what you're saying as the healthcare professional are so focused on the food issue, and working on that is actually solidifying the issue even more because you're not dealing with the deeper meaning behind it, which could be, like you're saying, something that affected them when they were a lot younger that you don't even realize what that issue was, or you've pushed it aside for so long and focused so long on the eating and body image that you think it's just that. That is, you guys, anyone who's listening, if you listen to that and take anything out of honestly this whole summit, that is so powerful.
Yeah.
It's
Well,
true.
it's relieving in a way because you see, if you're born thin-skinned and you're born that way, you're not going to change that any more than you're going to change the color of your eyes.
Right.
That's not a problem the way I see it. In fact, I think our world would be in a lot better shape if more of our world leaders were thin-skinned.
Mm-hmm.
However, there is a problem if you're born thin-skinned into a world that only values being thick-skinned. No big deal, water off a duck's back, you're too sensitive, you're overreacting. And then there's no one to teach you the skill set that's required for being a thin-skinned person and that needs to maneuver in a thick-skinned world. And so there's a metaphor that I use to help people understand that, which is, with metaphors, it's you use your imagination. And some people say, well, I don't have a good imagination. It's like, well, we all have really good imaginations. What do you think worrying is? It's like using our imagination not in service
Yes.
of our lives. But so imagine, if you can imagine being on the banks of a raging river. It's pouring down rain. You slip and you fall in and you're drowning. You're getting pulled down through the rapids. And along comes a big log. And you grab on, and the log saves your life. It keeps your head above water when surely you would have drowned.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually it carries you to a place in the river where the water's calm. And from there, you see the riverbank. But you can't get there because of the log. So now the irony is the very thing that saved your life is getting in the way of you going where you want to go in life. Make no mistake about it. Disordered eating serves a function in your life, a very important function, and it would behoove you to find out what that function is. And to make it more complicated, there's always someone on the riverbank going, let go of the log, let go of the log. And
right.
you're an absolute idiot because you can't let go of the log. Well, the way I see it is letting go of the log may not be the best thing to do initially. And we have a wise part of ourselves that will not let us let go of anything until we're ready. Mm-hmm. Because what would happen if you went, oh, okay, that's the person who loves you more than life itself, or the top expert in the field. And you say, okay, and you let go of the log, start to swim to shore, get halfway there and realize you don't have the strength to make it.
Right.
You don't have the strength to make it back to the log either, and you're really sunk. Mm-hmm. So it's part of us that won't let us let go of something until we're good and ready. So what do you do instead? Well, let go of the log and try floating. And when you start to sink, grab back on. The log and you practice treading water. And when you get tired, you grab back on. And then you let go of the log and you swim around it once, grab back on, twice, grab back on, 10 times, 100 times, 200 times, whatever it takes for you to have the strength and confidence to make it to shore. Then you let go of the log because it has no function any longer. So when people are wanting to break free from whatever their struggle is with eating, whether it's disordered eating or yo-yo dieting or full-blown eating disorder like anorexia or bulimia or binge eating disorder, it's very important for them to honor and appreciate the function that it has served. It has kept them from drowning in some very strong emotional currents.
Mm-hmm.
Because, we live in an emotionally illiterate culture. And so, most of us start off emotionally illiterate. And if you're emotionally sensitive, you really need that skill. And there are a number of skills, thank goodness not 1,001, but there's a small handful of skills that are absolutely essential if someone wants to break free. And the great thing is, first of all, I've been in the field long enough to know 100% recovery is absolutely, totally possible. I've seen hundreds, I've heard from thousands of people that have really done it, where food and body issues are not a part of their life any longer in a troublesome way.
Mm-hmm.
But to get there are certain skills. And once you get those skills, they're going to serve you the rest of your life, long after the disordered eating is gone.
Absolutely. I think a big thing that I'm hearing you say is that you have to take little steps and then kind of go from where your comfort is. Take a little step forward and then, okay, I'm ready. And then another little step and another little step. So it's continuing to take that action until you feel strong enough and have the courage to totally move out of it. But I completely agree with what you're saying about the disordered eating pattern, because I feel like that can apply to any part of your life where you're feeling stuck. And that that eating disorder or that relationship or that job or whatever served a purpose and brought you to where you're at. And it's helping you get to that next step and that next phase of your life. And you can't flip a switch and change it right away. You have to be gradually making the change to move through it. And I mean, I love the log analogy. I think that like you said, it makes sense, and I can interpret it with how that means and works for me, and someone else can interpret it in a different way, but it applies to our lives. And the other thing I really love that you shared that I think is very applicable, again, to anything that is having us stuck, and that's everybody who's here and listening, is because we're trying to make a change and you're stuck and you don't know how. And I really feel like what you're sharing today is an incredible tool that is going to help everyone, no matter where you're stuck. But we are emotional beings. And if we press down and repress those emotions, it's not really functioning how we are as a person. And when you're sensitive to that, it's even harder. Like you said, you're a thin-skinned person trying to function in a thick-skinned world. And I'm pretty intuitive, and for a long time in my life, I was like, oh, ignore those feelings, push it down, I'm fine. I can't show how sensitive I am to certain things. And that brought me down my own path and where it was. But it wasn't until I said, wait, this isn't a bad thing. I can actually use this to make a change in my life, and I have to be okay with it. But it's a hard thing for somebody to do when we are in this world that you have to just, put on your big girl pants and say, I'm okay and it's fine. And I'm just very much in agreement with everything you're talking about, and that it is a gradual process, and you do have to build up the strength and courage to make a change, because it is a big change, but it doesn't have to be an impossible change. It's taking these little steps. So you've shared a little bit about how to take some of the little steps, but I would love to hear a little bit more about that, with where you help people get started, because I think that's what really trips people up, is they're so intimidated by, okay, I know there's something I want to change, I know there's something I want to shift, but I'm here and I need to go way down here, and I'm afraid to take that first step because I feel like I have to make a giant leap. So where is the best place to start, or what do you suggest?
Well, I think it helps to understand that, yes, sometimes it does feel a bit like crawling over cut glass on your bare knees. But the process also can be fun. And so that's one of the things that people don't realize. And so basically where you begin is, and where you end up is, whatever the food issues are, they're going to take you there, which is way cool. You're going to see how this works. So again, using your imagination, imagine two tanks, tank A and tank B. Now, tank A is the tank we fill when we need physical nourishment, and you fill it with food. Tank B is the tank we fill when we need emotional or spiritual nourishment, and you fill it with soul food, which is things like attention, affection, appreciation, acknowledgement, meditation, prayer, and so on. But what happens is we think there's only one tank. So what happens is we feel hungry because we are hungry beings, and we go to eat, and then either we can't stop. Before we know it, tank A is full and overflowing and we're still hungry, or we don't even want to get close to tank A because it seems like the bottomless pit to us. So this is what gets played out with eating disorder or disordered eating. So what has to happen is you have to be able to tease the two tanks apart, because no amount of food will ever fill tank B. So the way you do it is by developing interoceptive awareness, which is the ability to read your inner states of being, your physical states as well as your emotional states. So you begin with learning your hunger and satiety cues. You see, we're taught to eat for a gazillion other reasons rather than physical hunger. We're taught to eat because it's time to eat, because everybody else is eating, because someone who loves you prepared this food, for all these different reasons. And so we learn to look outside of ourselves for the cues for when to eat, rather than recognizing, and we're all born with these cues. We all have them in our bodies. There is an actual physical sensation that will tell you that. And so I'll start with asking someone, okay, what's the physical sensation that tells you when you are hungry, and where in your body do you feel it? And typically the answer I'll get is, oh, I get a little lightheaded or dizzy, or my stomach starts to growl really loudly. That's not hunger. That's famished. And what's going to happen if you wait to eat until you're famished? You, me, the rest of us, right? We're going to eat everything that's not nailed down, because that's how the body is designed. The sensation of hunger is a whisper, not a shout. And it's very subtle, and it's a physical sensation. It's an expansion or a contraction, a heaviness or a lightness, a roughness, a smoothness, a hollowness or a density, a movement or a stillness, a coolness or a warmth. You see what I'm saying? It's a physical sensation. I feel like pizza is not a physical sensation.
That's true.
So we have to learn these signals. We have to know them. And people who don't struggle with eating, they know them. They may not know they know them, but they respond to these cues. So there's a little technique that I recommend, because many of us are taught to disregard the signals. So it's sort of like a lot of static on the line. We can't hardly even hear them clearly. And so the exercise I recommend, and I recommend all of your listeners try this, and it's a great one to do with kids, by the way. They like doing this. Is that whenever so let's say all you know is lightheaded and dizzy. Okay. You go and you get the food and you eat 2 bites. And then you ask yourself, am I still hungry? And if the answer is yes, you say, well, how do I know I'm still hungry? And you might say, well, I'm a little lightheaded still and my stomach's growling. Okay, 2 more bites. And then ask yourself, am I still hungry? If the answer is yes, how do I know? And you keep looking for sensations, and you keep going until when you ask yourself, am I still hungry? The answer is no. And you say, well, how do I know I'm not hungry? And you look for a sensation in your body that is your sensation for fullness. And again, it can be an expansion or a contraction, a movement, a stillness, a roughness, a smoothness, a hollowness, a density, a coolness, a warmth, and so on. And so learning, and this takes a while, by the way, because most of us are conditioned not to know this. But if you get in the habit, eventually you'll start learning and fine-tuning these signals. Because a lot of people, when I say, what's the sensation for fullness and where do you feel it, they go, well, it's kind of hard to breathe, or I have to unbuckle my belt. And it's like, no, that's stuffed.
Right. That's beyond the fullness. Yeah.
And if you continually eat into your stuff, what's going to happen? you're going to eventually be a body size that's not right for you, whatever that may be.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the first step. And so again, imagine that you got it. You know your hunger and satiety signals. You really, you've nailed it. You're reaching for the pizza and you check in, not a hunger signal in sight, but you still want to eat that pizza. Anyone been in that position, right?
Oh my gosh, absolutely. But it's probably from bucket number 2 or B.
Yeah.
That's where your hunger.
Exactly. So now you just tumbled down Alice in Wonderland's rabbit hole, and you've landed smack dab in tank B. And in tank B, pizza is not pizza. Food is not food. What is it? It's a physical symbol of another kind of hunger that you're experiencing that you may not even know about. And I'm telling you, this is where the fun begins. Because now we get to, it's coded. You see, the hunger that we're feeling is coded, but it's coded in the food itself. It's coded in the foods we crave or the foods we fear. And if you can crack the code, now you really can get to your soul's hunger and learn how to feed that. Mm-hmm. So here's how you crack the code. Okay, it works something like this. Key foods typically have to do with either feeling like you're not sweet enough or there's not enough sweetness in your life. Crunchy, salty foods are usually associated with unexpressed anger and frustration. Warm foods like soups and stews typically are connected for a craving for emotional warmth. Spicy foods for either a desire or fear, depending on if this is a phobia or a craving, of excitement, stimulation, and change. And chocolate, well, we know that one from Valentine's, sex and romance, right?
Yeah.
So to give you an idea of what this looks like, I had a client once and she was struggling with bulimia. And I said to her, all right, if there were a food that you wish you could eat and have no consequences whatsoever, what would that food be? And she said, oh, that's easy. I'd have vanilla ice cream with strawberries on top. And I say, okay, I want you to imagine I've never had vanilla ice cream with strawberries on top, and you're going to tell me what's so fantastic about it. She said, well, it's sweet, it's smooth, and it's refreshing. When we took a look at what was going on in her life, her boyfriend was accusing her of not being sweet enough. She just hit a rough patch with her parents and she was desperately wanting it to smooth out. And she was in a dead-end job in need of a refreshing change. One food, 6 months of therapy. So you can see that it's coded. Sometimes it's coded in the language. I was working with a woman. She was an emergency room physician. And she came rushing into my session, all distressed and upset with herself, saying, oh my God, I can't believe what I did. I'm so disgusted with myself. And I said, whoa, what did you do? She goes, I can't believe it. I was working. I came home from work. I fixed some chicken tenders for my husband and myself. And before he even got home, I ate them all myself. I can't even believe it. I'm so disgusted. I said, whoa. Let's backtrack now. Let's see if we can track what happened here. So you were working in the emergency room, tending to all sorts of physical and emotional trauma, right? 12, 14 hours, right? And she goes, yeah. I said, so what do you think you were really hungry for? And she said, a hug. And I said, yeah, you wanted some TLC, some tender loving care, and instead you ate chicken tenders. Now, and this was spot on. When it's spot on, what happens is the metaphor is funny. It's not just enlightening in terms of illumination, but in terms of levity as well. You just laugh, and here's what happens when you get it, when you pop it, when you decode it. Then you've taken what has been unconscious into consciousness, and now you can work with it.
Exactly.
So that's when it starts to get fun. I recently had a client. She was in London, and we were doing a video session, and she was really upset. She always would come in with her hair flying, and she's just, and she said, okay. And she said, well, she was really upset because she had a binge. And I said, okay, what did you binge on? She goes, well, this is, I can't even say because I'm so ashamed, but I binge on sweets and ketchup. I always have to have ketchup. And I said, well, let's see what happened. I said, when was the binge? She goes, well, last night. I said, good. So that's not too long ago. What was happening that day? And she goes, well, she was in the tech industry, and they were doing a crowdfunding event. And she said, we had a new client and we had this big event, and it was very stressful because if we didn't make our deadline, the company was going to fold. And I said, oh, did you make the deadline? And she said, yes. And I said, did you know it that night? She goes, no. I said, so you went for the catch up, right? You're always trying to catch up.
That's amazing. And that's so powerful. I think that, first off, bringing something from the subconscious into the conscious level, like you said, that's where we can make a change and that's where we can shift. But the problem is a lot of us don't bring it out of the subconscious. So then that underlying issue just keeps playing itself out. But I think everything you've been sharing in these stories is what is part of what we're trying to have here in this event is nourishing your soul, nourishing your body for what your body really needs on that hunger level, but on that soul level, and filling yourself up in both aspects, and then bringing that together to become full and complete as a person. And that is what you help people do, but what everybody is really starving for is we're starving for this sense of fullness in ourselves as a being, and that does come from the physical self and from the emotional self, and it's bringing those two together. That's how we transform, and that's how we make a change. And I just have to say, you weave this beautiful web through the stories that makes it, for me, I'm making these connections, and I know everybody that's listening can be like, oh, that's why I have that. Or like you shared with your clients, that's why she had the ketchup, because she needed to feel ketchup. Or the ice cream, I think, is a perfect analogy, because food is something that we have a tendency to feel that we have a control over, and we can go for that when we want it. But when we look at why and what it is that we crave, and uncover just what you've been sharing of what that really does mean in our lives, that's when we have the power to change and transform. And that is just so beautiful. And I love the way that you share and teach us all of this, because that's where it can be powerful, and that's where it can make an impact. And I just have to say thank you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart, because it's beautiful. It's beautiful what you do, and it's beautiful how you help people. And I don't know, I'm like, if anyone else is listening is in the same state as I am, we all need to do this. We all need to do this for ourselves. Whether we are struggling with an eating disorder or disordered eating, it is a pattern that we can all fall into at some point in our lives, I believe.
Oh, we all do this. That's why when I first wrote Eating in the Light of the Moon, which that was over 20 years ago, and my sister said to me, she said, Anita, this is not about eating disorders. I said, yeah, I know. And just the portal that I'm going through, because I understand that the language of the soul is metaphor, and that's how it speaks to us. And so for many of us, though, then whatever it is that we're doing with food is a metaphor for our soul hunger. And once you can start to get that metaphoric language, it opens up a whole new world. And I think you're right. It's not like it's an us or them kind of thing. It's not like there's those weird people that struggle with food and eating, and then there's the rest of us. There are the rest of us, right? We all do it to one degree or another. And yeah. I'll tell you this story from my own life. One day I used to have a small little private practice in my home. And I was sitting around, I'd had lunch, and all of a sudden I had a craving for a vanilla ice cream dipped in chocolate. And I, checked in for a hunger signal. Of course, nothing. I just had lunch. And so I asked myself, well, okay. And here's the question. When you tune in and there's no hunger signal, the question then is, well, what's the feeling I'm trying not to feel? Because we don't eat for emotional reasons. We eat because we don't want to feel our emotions. So you typically then do a scan of your day. Am I still ticked off at the person who cut me off on the freeway? Or am I annoyed at something my coworker said? Or am I worried about this upcoming parent-teacher meeting or whatever? You kind of do a scan and try to find the feeling you're trying not to feel. But typically, more often than not, the answer, I have to tell you and your listeners, the answer will be, I don't know. Because Carl Jung said the unconscious really is unconscious. It's out of your awareness. So that's what I did. I said, okay, what's the feeling I'm trying not to feel? I feel fine. Everything's okay. So I couldn't find it. So I did what I often tell my clients to do: go get the food. But eat it now consciously, deliberately. You're trying to crack the code. You're trying to see what it's saying, what your soul is saying metaphorically through the food. So there was a small little frozen yogurt place near my place, like a minute or two drive away. So I go over there, and this is Hawaii. So I go in, and they said, I said, I need a vanilla cone dipped in chocolate. And she said, I'm sorry, ma'am, but it's too hot and the vanilla is too soft. And so just as I was ready to freak out, she said, but I can put it in a cup and then pour the chocolate shell and put the cone upside down in it. And I went, perfect, because now I can put on my lap, drive home, sit at my table, and eat it consciously, deliberately, which is what I did, asking myself, well, what is it? What is it? And I'm up to here with vanilla cone dipped in, and finally, boom, I got it. Dairy Queen. Now, let me tell you what Dairy Queen meant to me. When I was a little girl in the 50s and 60s, I grew up on the island of Guam. We only had 2 fast food restaurants. One of them was Dairy Queen. And every Sunday after church, my dad would take us to Dairy Queen, and I would get a vanilla cone dipped in chocolate. Fast forward to what was going on in my life at the time. 9/11 had just happened, and I'd seen all those horrific images on the TV screen, and every fiber in my being wanted to shut down. I'm an emotionally sensitive individual. But I had clients who had been in those buildings. I had clients who had had loved ones in those buildings. I couldn't shut down and work with them. So what was going on was, what I was so hungry for was the time I was a little girl, when I lived on a little island and nothing bad ever happened. I went, oh, hallelujah, got it. So I go in to see my next client. She comes rushing in. She goes, oh my gosh, you're going to have to help me. I'm just going to gain that 40 pounds I just lost. I can't stop eating this vanilla ice cream. I don't even like vanilla ice cream. I like chocolate ice cream. So I said, well, so why are you eating vanilla ice cream? And she said, well, I had a party, so I got a big tub from Costco. It's been in the freezer all this time, but now I can't stay out of it. And I said, well, was there ever a time you liked vanilla ice cream? You wouldn't believe what she said. She said, Dairy Queen. And she was from New York City.
Wow.
So this is one of those times I believe self-disclosure is really important. I said, let me tell you what I just did. And it popped it for her. And that night I was on the phone talking to my sister who was still living on Guam. And I said, I was telling her what I did. She goes, oh my gosh, that's why I did it. I said, what? She goes, I drove across the island in rush hour traffic to get to the only Dairy Queen that was left because I had to have it. Now, she had her own health food store with her own little frozen yogurt things, but no, she had to have that. So that's how powerful this is for us. And if you can imagine that for all of us, our very first experience of being in distress as an infant, we are either given the bottle or the breast.
Yep.
So that this connection between food and soothing, it's laid there in the neural pathways, and so it's no wonder that our impulse would be to turn to food. But the problem comes when it becomes symbolic, when there is an actual physical hunger, and so it's sort of like if you had 1,000 American flags. Would that make you more free?
No.
It's the symbol of freedom, not freedom itself. But same with food. It's the symbol for comfort, soothing, nourishment. But when there's no physical hunger, it's only a symbol, and you got to feel tank B, because that means there's soul hunger that's trying to get your attention as best it can.
That is the perfect combination and explanation of everything you've been teaching us. I I mean, I just have to say thank you so much, because I think the way that you tell your stories and make it us open to our imagination, but understanding it in a way that makes sense for us is very true and very powerful. And I am in full alignment with nourishing your soul. I mean, that's part of like the work I do is called Nourish Your Soul, because that piece is something that we always forget about that is so important and vital to ourselves. And I just have to thank you for everything that you've shared with me, with everybody listening. And I can just tell how in it you are, and this is just flowing through you because it's just a part of who you are. And it's honestly an honor to be witness to the beautiful work that you do. So I just wanted to say thank you so much for everything that you've shared with us today. And I know you have a free gift for everybody who's listening, but I would also love for you to share ways that people can get in touch and reach out to you, because I know you have the ability and already have transformed so many lives. So I hope that somebody who is listening here who needs to hear your message, because there are people that need to hear your message, I want them to be able to get in touch with you if they need to. So could you please share that with everybody?
I'd be happy to. I have a website, dranitajohnston.com. People can reach me there. But I also have an online course called Light of the Moon Cafe. And it's 8 weeks of daily stories like I'm telling today, and metaphors, and it's basically how to crack the code. It involves live calls with me, and also if people are interested in individual sessions, I'm available for that. And they can reach me at Anita, Anita, at lightofthemooncafe.com. And if you go to lightofthemooncafe.com/my gift, you'd be able to get my food and metaphor guide. So that's where I talk about the sweet foods and the salty foods, and you can track that. And there's a little exercise that you can do, and you can also sign up at Light of the Moon Cafe for my newsletter. And every week I send out a vlog, a video metaphor.
Beautiful.
So, if people are interested in that, they can contact me there.
Fantastic. Well, I have to say thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, your time, and just your gifts. You truly do have a gift. So I am very grateful and really do appreciate everything that you've been sharing with us today. And
Thank you.
thank
It's been a
you.
pleasure, Katie.
Fantastic. All right. Thank you guys so much. And we'll tune in for our next talk.